Have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Fran McNamara, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Tuesday, July 14th, 2026 issue of the Niagara Falls Review. Proudly Canadian owned. Okay, so I'm looking at the front page here, and there's okay, I'm just going to go from left to right. Park Animals Rescue backed, and rescue is in quote marks. Move may bring marine land closer to redevelopment. Okay. Local officials are hopeful this past week's new U.S. authorities have approved an emergency rescue operation for Canada's last captive whales and dolphins at Marineland will bring the site closer to a sale. This could lead the park to be redeveloped into another major attraction, this time without animals. On July 1st, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration authorized the emergency rescue plan after entering into an agreement with SeaWorld, Georgia Aquarium, and Shed Aquarium. Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati says, here's a quote, "We're relieved and we're happy that there's going to be a soft landing for the whales. They're beautiful creatures and they deserve to have a great home." Okay, now he goes on to say, this opens up the Marineland property for a world-class attraction. I know there's been many incredible proposals. Marineland's big enough to host 3 Magic Kingdoms, said Diodati. Okay. And he continues the quote, "We're excited about the potential for that land being another major draw and another big piece of entertainment for Niagara Falls." Okay. Now it says, the article continues, the quote is over. Marineland closed in 2024. The property is up for sale, and Marineland has said it's running out of money to care for the 30 beluga and 4 dolphins. It's believed any potential sale of the property is contingent on the animals being rehoused. Okay, now animal inhabitants. During the last decade, the park has been home to hundreds of fallow, F-A-L-L-O-W. During the past decade, the park has been home to hundreds of fallow deer, red deer, and elk. It was also home to bears and bison that have since been moved off the property. The 12 bears went to a Colorado sanctuary in mid-May. The other animals are in the process of being moved, although there's controversy involved. The Canadian press reported the process is under investigation by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. As for the marine animals, nobody wants the liability. Now I have to go to the next page here. Of being responsible for the whales, and essentially that's why most of the deals fell apart. This according to Mayor Diodati. Last month, Ottawa endorsed a plan to move the animals to several facilities in the United States and even one in Spain. Where will the whales go? Well, the whales are set to go to 5 marine parks: Shed Aquarium in Chicago, Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, SeaWorld locations in San Antonio and San Diego, and Oceanographic Valencia in Spain. The U.S. parks are part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, who rallied to help Marineland after Ottawa nixed a request last fall for permits to export the whales to an aquarium in China. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said it has authorized a move of up to 28 belugas. It's believed 2 other belugas and 4 dolphins will head to Spain. The American Parks Consortium said it is still awaiting permits from the Spanish government. Marineland said in a Canadian press story it welcomed the U.S. authorization of the relocation, but could not be reached for comment for this story. Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans issued the first batch of permits to export the whales and dolphins in early June, and will have to sign off on final permits once they check the health of the animals. Fisheries Minister Joanne Thompson, in a statement, said she'll give a final sign-off once the animal's health check is complete and when the appropriate documentation is submitted. Repurposing the site. In a post to his Facebook page, Niagara Falls NDP MPP Wayne Gates said after long calling for a plan that ensures the safety and well-being of Marineland's animals, this is in quotes, we finally have a solution. And here's more of his quote. We need more information from the federal government about the timeline, but this is good news, and our community wants this to happen as soon as possible, he said. Gates also said many people are wondering about the future of the site, and here's a quote. I hope we see the property repurposed as a staple of Niagara Falls tourism without any animals. Repurposing would not only bring more dollars into our community and support other businesses, but it will bring stability for all the people who have worked at Marineland and protect those jobs. Mayor Diodati said while the city is not involved in the animal transfer, it's 100% involved in the land use aspect, and here's a quote, because anything Marineland does has to go through the city, close quote. He said Marineland traditionally was a big employer in Niagara and supported the local tourism and hospitality industry. And here's another quote. A lot of people benefited from the many years of Marineland, but animals in captivity fell out of favor, and Marineland never adapted with that. They stuck with their original MO. And having said that, I'm glad we've been able to turn the corner, get away from animals in captivity, and now let's look for a world-class attraction that does not involve animals, that's going to bring many people and entertain many people coming to Niagara Falls. Okay, and finally, no housing. Diodati said the property Marineland sits on must remain tourist land. He dismissed any suggestion it would be redeveloped into homes. And here's a quote from the mayor. It's not zoned for homes. It would be an absolute tragedy to turn Marineland into a subdivision. And again, they're not making more tourist land. There's a finite amount, and it's got to remain as an attraction, something like Six Flags, something like Canada's Wonderland, something like Universal. Okay, so that's the end of that article, and there's some, it says, with files from the Canadian press, Ray Spitzeri is a Niagara Falls-based reporter with the Niagara Falls Review. So let's hope they find something, let's say, to get that land doing something they want it to do. Okay, now on the front page here, Niagara Falls Review, we have a picture of a gentleman here, a very calm-looking man in a chair in front of a computer, but looks like he's staring at a reporter. And it says, Mike Haynes is retiring after a 47-year career, primarily dedicated to helping Niagara residents as constituency assistant for local MPPs and MPs. He is sitting in his office with a photo of himself and former MPP Cindy Forster and also Peter Kormos on the screen behind. Haynes said he never planned on working as a constituency assistant when he began his career. And here's the quote for the whole article. Call off your pit bull. And underneath it says, Mike Haynes earned a reputation for tenacity while helping constituents. Okay, now this article is by Alan Benner. And it says, for Mike Haynes, helping people in need has been a labor of love. While elected officials get the credit for helping their constituents, they're not working alone. Several of them have had a pit bull working tenaciously behind the scenes to help people in need. And in this case, for Mike Haynes, who spent the bulk of his 47-year career working as a constituency assistant with Niagara political representatives, helping people in need has been a labor of love. And here's a quote from him. "I'm doing this job because I like helping people. I don't care whether it's liberal, conservative, or New Democrat. I'm here to help people. Whoever walks through that door, they get assistance. We don't ask them about their political affiliation." He's retiring at the end of July. Now a subheading says, "Unexpected career." Haynes said he never planned on working as a constituency assistant when he began his career. After graduating from Loyalist College in Belleville, he landed his first real job in 1979, working as a reporter for CKGB-FM, a radio station in Timmins. He then spent a few years working for CKSO in Sudbury. Haynes moved to Niagara in 1982 and worked for a few Niagara radio stations before his career path changed. He discovered his passion for helping people who had fallen through the cracks of government bureaucracy after taking a job with St. Catharines Liberal MP Walt Lastuca in 1994. And that's where he earned his nickname. Okay, and he says, trying to get to the next page here, "When I was with Walt, I told him they would tell him, 'Call off your pit bull.' When I'm doing cases and trying to help people, I'm like a dump truck. I just push my way through and I find any leads I can." At the same time, Haynes continued to work as a freelance reporter with local radio stations, where he met people like St. Catharines Liberal MPP Jim Bradley and Niagara Center's provincial NDP representative Peter Kormos. Haynes said he was initially reluctant when Kormos offered him a job in early 2006, but he ultimately accepted the position, joining the team in April that year. He went on to spend the next 2 decades working for Niagara Center's provincial NDP representatives, including Kormos, Cindy Forster, and currently Jeff Birch. And as Haynes says, "Any MPP or MP I work for, I gave that person 100%. Birch said Haynes and his colleague Mary Chamberlain are among the longest-serving constituency assistants in Ontario, and replacing either of them won't be easy. And Birch says, "In a constituency office, you kind of have people that specialize in certain things. Like one constituency assistant may do a lot of outreach with booking events and things. Other would do casework. Mike's big thing has been casework. He's done the same kind of thing for many years through many MPPs, and he's just a real staunch advocate for the constituents." Subheading says, "Tenacious advocate." He said the tenacity with which Haynes has done his job has helped elevate the perception of local political representatives. And Birch says, Haynes definitely makes whoever he's working for look good because he gets things resolved and he just doesn't give up on cases. It's a very unique talent and will be very difficult to replace or replicate. Among the thousands of people Haynes has been able to help, a few stand out in his memory, such as people being bilked by scammers selling contracts for water filtration and HVAC systems. Haynes said one older man was twice targeted by HVAC marketing firms that placed liens on his home. And here's a quote from Michael. "It took me probably maybe 3 months to get him out of it, but he would not sell his house because he had one company come along, and then another company came along 2 years later and gave him the same equipment, a furnace, air conditioner, the old stuff they put out on the driveway. He was paying for 2 different companies for the same thing. I'm actually dealing with people right now with another company I've never even heard of, and it's the same situation." Close quote. Haynes said changes have recently been implemented. Let's see here. Okay, Haynes said changes have recently been implemented to prevent unscrupulous marketers from ripping people off, likely as a result of the work he and local MPPs have done over the years. And you know, before we continue, I just wanted to remind you, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, so let's get back to the kudos from Michael Haynes. Okay. Another issue Haynes has fought hard to address is the condition of supportive housing facilities. He recalled working with Forster to bring a Thanksgiving meal to one such facility in Welland after learning there was no food there. He said Forster actually went out, got groceries, and went over there. But rather than welcoming her generosity, he said the owner of the facility threatened to charge her for trespassing. And Haynes recalled, she said, go ahead. Haynes, however, said it's getting increasingly difficult to intervene in situations like that. And here's a quote from Mike again. It's very, very hard to try and help people these days. But that doesn't mean we're going to give up on them. Okay, then there's growing challenges. Meanwhile, the needs are becoming increasingly difficult for people to cope with without help. And Michael says, as the years have passed, you can see how it's gotten worse, like the homelessness, affordable housing. There's a whole long list of people on a waiting list, and it just gets longer and longer, and it's very discouraging. Close quote. He said trying to get information from government officials is often like pounding sand. And here's a quote from Michael. They just don't seem to be listening. It's very hard. It's harder and harder to try and get contacts and get people that are listening to you. Close quote. But nevertheless, he said his colleagues at the constituency office will continue to work to help people in the riding. That's what we're here for, he said. Bert said he hopes to continue calling on Haynes in the future. You know, he'll still be around, and he's a good friend of mine. I may bring him back every once in a while on a project or two, if he's willing. Well, God bless him. Okay. Now we're going back to page 1. Okay, we've seen the aquarium. We've seen Pit Bill, Mike Haynes. Pit Bull, I should say. And now, another article fresh from page 1. Otto Scrapolini stands tall atop Port Colborne shop. A sculpture made of discarded car parts, destined for the scrapyard, stands atop of a storage container at the Erie Muffler and Brake Shop in Port Colborne. And its name is now Otto Scrapolini, S-C-R-A-P. Otto Scrapolini. Okay, Laura Barton writes this article. Erie Muffler and Brake Shop's scrap metal sculpture officially has a name. So meet Oliver Scrapolini, named by Welland resident Gary Hardy. Dante Chacon, who owns the shop at 425 Kalali St. East in Port Colborne, says, we all love the winning name. Otto standing for auto, Scrapolini standing for scrap. Catchy name, isn't it? The sculpture welded to the top of a shipping container on a ship's property got its name in a contest. Residents were invited to submit a name for a chance to win an oil change valued at up to $100 at Erie Muffler Shop. From 21 entries, the list was narrowed down to final 3, and then a draw determined the winner, Chacon said. Hardy, a delivery driver for Dow Auto Supply, said he makes many deliveries to the shop and knows Chacon and his team well. He heard about the contest on one of his visits, and he asked, what's that? Upon seeing the sculpture atop the container. And he says, you know, it was kind of funny because it's in the form of a man, he said of his first impression of it. Hardy and one of the shop's staff members went back and forth with fun names, and during the repartee he thought of Otto Scrapolini. The staff member encouraged him to submit it for the contest. So he said he thought of the name Otto from the Tom Hanks movie A Man Called Otto, and how it sounded like Otto. Scrapolini came from the fact the figure's made from scrap metal. Since the sculpture went up, Chacon said people have been fascinated by Otto. In particular, people are awed when they hear how it was made. Mechanic Nathan Van Natter assembled the metallic man from various car parts destined for the scrapyard. Okay, and it mentions here, Laura Barton's reporting is funded by the Canadian government through its local journalism initiative. The funding allows her to report on stories about the communities of Fort Erie and Port Colborne. Reach her at lbarton@metroland.com. Okay, so I think that does it for the front page. There's a few ads that we won't get into. And page 2 is a continuation of many of those articles. So let's see now. Okay, we'll go to page 3. And this headline article, Unsanctioned Float Event on Canal Causes Issues at Welland Park. And this is written by reporter Dave Johnson. So Dave Johnson writes, illegal parking, overnight camping, open fires, extensive litter, and a fire caused by unauthorized fireworks were among the consequences of an unsanctioned float event on Welland Recreational Canal, says the city's chief administrative officer. A memo in Friday's online council information package from Jessica Rudell said Welland Fire and Emergency Services responded to the fire with specialized water rescue equipment. However, she did not specify what that equipment was. At the same time, emergency services were also managing a serious crash in the city with life-threatening injuries. Now here's a quote. While staff are not aware of any major injuries resulting from the gathering, the event required bylaw enforcement, emergency service intervention, and municipal cleanup efforts. Ruddell's memo was in response to misinformation circulating after the cancellation of the annual Canadian Tire Welland Float Fest, scheduled for July 5th. Excuse me. Float Fest Board of Directors pulled the plug on the event more than a week ahead of its 10th anniversary on the recreational canal. Created and founded by Phil Gladman in 2016, the free, family-friendly event saw as many as 2,000 people float on the canal between the Lincoln Street Barge and the old train swing bridge south of Rotary Club of Welland Park. Factoring in shoreline attractions, including food and artisan vendors, live music, and a children's play area, the festival's total draw could reach up to 4,000 people. Float Fest set a Guinness World Record in 2017 when participants connected themselves in a continuing line of personal floats measuring 165.74 meters long. The event took a break from the water in 2020 and 21 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time of the event's cancellation, Float Fest chair Jeff Bennett said the decision stemmed from a safety gap created by the event's intended move to Welland International Flatwater Center because of its growing popularity. The group wanted to close Canal Bank Street, opposite the Flatwater Center, to ensure they would know who was in the water in the event of an emergency. There is a short gravel road on the east side of the canal where people can park and enter the waterway. In her memo, Ruddell addressed the event's cancellation and proposed road closure. And here's the quote. Float Fest 2026 was canceled by the event organizer, not by the city. Throughout the Special Event Application Review Team, SEART, process, staff worked collaboratively with the organizer to identify solutions that would allow the event to proceed safely and in compliance with municipal requirements, close quote. Special Event Application Review Team is a specialized group of city staffers from various departments such as Public Works, Fire Services, and Recreation, who collaborate to review and support outdoor events on city property. Ruddle said as part of the review of the event, organizers requested a closure of Canal Bank Street. Now here's a quote. This request was not approved because the proposed event footprint did not extend to that area. Road closures are not generally used to address parking concerns where parking is already prohibited, as these matters are managed through existing traffic regulations and bylaw enforcement. And she added, to support the event, staff offered several alternatives, including municipal overflow parking, dedicated bylaw enforcement resources, assistance obtaining additional barricades, and a temporary road closure during the planned fireworks display, close quote. Her memo also said that while the concept of a car show in Canal Bank was discussed during planning conversations, it was never formally submitted or approved as part of the event application. Then it says, residents planned unofficial gathering. Following the cancellation, social media posts called on residents to gather at the park and float on the waterway. Both Float Fest organizers and the city warned that any event would lack the required coordination and safety measures, putting attendees at their own risk. City staff notified Niagara Regional Police, Niagara Emergency Medical Services, fire crews, and bylaw officers of the planned gathering. And Ruddle has the final quote in this article. The city's concern was never about individuals gathering or using the recreational waterway. Rather, it was ensuring activities occurred safely and in compliance with applicable laws and bylaws. The events of July 5 demonstrated why established permitting processes are necessary to protect participants, emergency responders, municipal resources, and also to protect the broader community. Okay, so David Johnson is a Welland-based reporter with the Welland Tribune. Okay, so that's page 3, and then there's a smaller article on page 3, and looks like it's included in its entirety, so we'll be reading that in just a moment. But I just wanted to remind you, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, so here's the headline. Merged social service providers focus on individuals that fall through the cracks. And that part was in quotes, individuals that fall through the cracks. And there's a picture here of Margaret Beaupre, CEO of Marathon Community Services, formerly Main Street Niagara and Gateway Residential and Community Support Services. And Margaret says the organization is undergoing a rebrand after a merger. Okay, so let's see what reporter Matthew P. Barker has written about this situation, hoping to help people who fall through the cracks. Niagara's first cross-sector service provider is undergoing a rebranding more closely suited to its mission. Mainstream Community Support Services and Gateway Residential and Community Support Services announced in a media release that they have officially merged and they are now operating under a new name. Marathon Community Services. It comes after the two organizations worked cooperatively for nearly a decade toward what is called a statutory amalgamation, a legal process to fuse the two administrations into one. The marathon name, says Margaret Beaupre, Marathon CEO, reflects how we see ourselves. It's about building greater independence, and meaningful change takes time. So when you look at a marathon, it takes a lot of time planning, thinking, and people helping you to do it. Beaupre said the new name also reflects more of the spirit and mission in the actual sectors that we oversee. We felt that reflected the journey of the people we support across both organizations, she said. Marathon will continue to provide specialized services within 3 distinct sectors: developmental services, mental health, and homelessness. Now here's a quote from Margaret Beaupre. We're hoping we can use a no wrong door approach because we have 3 very distinct service systems that people navigate when they come through our doors. We're big on making sure we can create lasting change, and that means you need to work together. No one agency can do everything for everyone. Marathon currently supports more than 1,400 people in Niagara and provides housing opportunities for more than 440 individuals, says the media release. Beaupre said it takes many diverse and aligned partners to meet the needs of the community. With vast changes occurring within the organization, Beaupre said no staff were let go, fired, or laid off. The programs still need workers who understand the complex needs of clients. So why amalgamate? And she says the reason we amalgamated was not to restructure people out of jobs. It was to create capacity. So we're quite happy to say no one lost their job because of the amalgamation. And she added the purpose was not to cut and slash, but to create added capacity to serve more people. And here's a quote from Margaret. We're really trying to focus on individuals that fall through the cracks. So a person with complex needs or dual diagnosis, and Marathon creates an opportunity for people to be supported more fully. The organization operates out of the former Trinity United Church at 15 Pine Street in Thorold. It moved into the site last year after updating the building. Beaupre said with all services cohabitating in the same location, it will prevent more people from slipping through unaided and provide support when and where they need it. And she adds, having developmental services, mental health, and homelessness under one roof, we're able to help people navigate and get better service. Beaupre emphasized the need to focus on more supportive housing to meet people where they are at as an area of focus move forward, which will help people be successful. Our focus is on supportive housing. We believe change happens with secure housing and how we help people do that. Supportive housing, that's the biggest part of what we do, and everything we do feeds into that. In Ontario, this support provides individuals with complex needs with supports to live independently. This includes people with mental health issues who are unhoused or who have physical disabilities and older adults. Housing helps reduce strain on medical and mental health services associated with harmful health outcomes and improves community integration, she said. The next chapter for Marathon is an exciting one for Beaupre. It will provide opportunities to expand services across Niagara, to create movie partnerships, more partnerships, I should say, and also, quite simply, to help people. And she says, we're the lead for the Homelessness, Addiction Recovery and Treatment, HART Hub, on Queenston Street in St. Catharines. We've also taken on recuperative care with Reach Niagara, she said. And finally, she mentions we're looking at how do we expand services, create partnerships to help as many people as possible. Okay, and finally, just a little focus on staff expertise. Beaupre said the great thing about the organizational change is services will be available to help identify external services people are looking to accept or access. And here's a quote. Our staff has expertise in developmental services, mental health and homelessness, so we will have an internal intake system where we'll be able to refer people back and forth based on that initial intake. And she adds, we'll be able to connect people a lot quicker, being able to look at them as a whole person and all their needs from a holistic standpoint. To connect Marathon Community Services, call. Okay, so to contact the services, here's the number. So I'll give you a second if you can jot this down or if you have some way of recording what the number is. To contact Marathon Community Services, call 905 934 3924. And I'll say that again. 905 934 3924. Now that's if you want to contact Marathon Community Services. If you are in crisis, those listening right now, I urge you, if you're in crisis, call 1-866-550-5205. So if you're in immediate crisis, please call 1-866-550-5205. And you'll be very glad you called. Okay, that whole article is written by Matthew Barker, and it says he's a St. Catharines-based general assignment reporter for the Standard. So let's see if we have anything else we can read from this wonderful section. That was the end of page 5. Let's see what we got here. Oh, we're in the editorial page. Oh, wow. Okay. So there's some, at least 3 editorials, and this would be on page 6. And one of them is actually an editorial that says, does Canada need submarines? Huh. Okay. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, now this is the editorial opinion page, and the first one to the left is, don't squander soccer's new momentum. Now, I'm sure you probably noticed here in the Western New York area, there was a real turn in support for the World Soccer playoffs and FIFA, as it's called, and there was a lot of enthusiasm in our area. And of course, that includes Niagara. So let's see what Peter Agruso and Kevin Blue have written. Some sporting moments end when the final whistle blows. Others endure and can even have the power to change a country. Team Canada has returned home from the FIFA World Cup, but the opportunities it created with its remarkable run are only just coming into view. For several unforgettable weeks, Canadians rallied behind a team that made history. Millions watched from homes, workplaces, restaurants, and public squares. Conversations about our national team reached people who had never followed soccer before. The accomplishments Canada made on the pitch were unprecedented. Canada earned its first point at a men's FIFA World Cup in 2026, as well as its first victory. It advanced from the group stage for the first time and won its first knockout round match. The players represented our country with courage, humility, and resilience, proving that Canada belongs among the world's leading football nations. And just as important, they inspired Canadians. Young players could see themselves wearing the maple leaf. Parents discovered a new appreciation for the game. Newcomers to Canada saw a team that reflected the diversity of the country they proudly call home. Longtime supporters welcomed millions of new Team Canada fans. For a brief but meaningful period, soccer became part of our national conversation. We cannot take that for granted. Countries around the world have experienced similar surges of enthusiasm after major sporting events, and some have turned those surges into lasting participation, stronger clubs, better facilities, and sustained international success. For these countries, it was not what happened during the tournament that mattered most. It was what happened afterwards. At Canada Soccer, it's our responsibility to help ensure that 2026 FIFA World Cup becomes the foundation for long-term growth. Our highest priority is to deliver a national training center, providing Canada with a permanent home for its national teams, as well as a true center of excellence for player development, coaching, officiating, and sports science. Every leading football nation has a place where its best players come together to train, learn, and prepare for international competition. However, Canada still does not. Across the country, communities are struggling to keep pace with demand for soccer. Wait lists continue to grow because there are not enough spaces for children to play. Indoor facilities are oversubscribed. Community fields are booked from morning till night. This is why continued investment in local soccer infrastructure matters. More fields, indoor facilities, and community stadiums are not simply investments in sport, they also are investments in healthier communities, more active children, stronger neighborhoods for generations to come. The World Cup has reminded us that sport can still unite Canadians. For a few extraordinary weeks, people from every province and territory, every background and every generation came together behind one team. Those shared experiences strengthen our communities and remind us that there are moments capable of bringing Canadians together. But now here comes the harder part. The legacy of this World Cup will not be measured only by what Team Canada accomplished in 2026. It will be measured by how many children began playing the game, how many communities built new places to play, how many organizations invested, how many volunteers stepped forward, how many Canadians remain part of the journey long after the tournament's end. 20 years from now, Canadians will remember the goals, the celebrations, and the pride they felt watching their men's national team compete on the world's biggest stage. Our hope is that they will also remember this is the moment Canada chose to build something lasting. Okay, and it identifies the people who wrote this column. Peter Lagrusso is president of Canada Soccer's board of directors, and Kevin Blue, B-L-U-E, is CEO General Secretary of Canadian Soccer. Okay, now the next editorial, I guess you'd call it, on the opinion page. Wow. Okay, this is by Gwen Dyer. It's a shame they can't both lose. Okay. The last time oil tankers were being shot up in the Persian Gulf back in the 1980s, it was Saddam Hussein's brutal tyranny in Iraq versus Ayatollah Khomeini, a revolutionary Islamic regime in Iran. And people used to say, it's a shame they both can't lose. The United States backed Saddam because he was just another murderous thug, whereas the new regime in Tehran was an actual threat to American interests. It had overthrown Iran's American-based puppet king and wanted to spread its Islamic ideology across the region. So, of course, Ronald Reagan's administration chose Saddam's side. The Americans chose the lesser evil, as it were, but at least they knew it was evil. Once in a while, they would even say it out loud. It's a shame that both sides can't lose. but they never did anything about it, and after 10 years of slaughter, the war ended in a draw. About 30 years later, the world finds itself in a similar situation. This time it is the United States itself, not a local henchman, that has attacked Iran, and Israel has also made thousands of airstrikes on Iran. Yet the war has swiftly degenerated into a stalemate that could last for years. Is it inappropriate to wish that both sides could lose? Well, the U.S. has already lost. Donald Trump can bomb Iran to his heart's content, but he cannot force Iran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. The U.S.-Israeli attack has taught the Iranian regime its control of the strait is a far more effective strategic asset than its mythical nuclear weapons ever could have been, and they will never give it up. The current on and off again strikes and pauses in the Persian Gulf are due to the fact that the memorandum of misunderstanding that made the 60-day ceasefire possible was deliberately vague about who actually gets to control the Gulf. A straightforward reading of this MOU puts Iran in charge of guaranteeing safe passage, and Iran is already insisting that ships pass through on the Iranian-controlled northern side of the strait with Tehran's permission and guidance. However, the ink was not yet dry on the MOU when the U.S. began, in quotes, encouraging ships to use southern Oman-controlled channel instead. Iran immediately began targeting those ships to discourage that behavior, and the U.S. hit various Iran shore installations again, and so on. Protection rackets often involve violence. This may go on for some time because neither side yet believes it has been defeated. Trump really does have no way of turning this around, but the Iranian regime, unfortunately, can't see a path to victory. It would be a military victory, of course, but Trump is a man of little patience, and at any point he can just declare a victory and leave, as the sane Americans used to say during the final years of the Vietnam War. That would probably leave Iranians suffering under the brutal tyranny of their current rulers for a long time to come. By last year, that 47-year-old regime was clearly nearing its sell-by date. January's demonstrations were suppressed with a massacre of up to 35,000 protesters. But in the normal course of events, mass killing on this scale would suggest the regime was on its last legs. It probably was, until the United States and Israel launched their surprise attack. Now instead, the regime has appealed to both Iranian nationalism and the Shia Muslim tradition of victimhood, and won a whole new claim to legitimacy by its successful defense of the Iranian state. It really would be a good thing if both sides could lose this war. The Iranians might be free of the theocratic regime at last, but it might also be the beginning of the end politically for Trump. But that is not to be. Only one side has lost. Okay, so Gwen Dyer, London-based independent journalist, wrote that editorial. It's a shame they can't both lose. Okay. Now, just to remind you, you're listening to a reading of articles and features from Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So, as our time is winding down here, I wanted to get to this editorial that says, "Does Canada need submarines?" And this is written by Wesley Wark, W-A-R-K. He's a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation. So let's see what Wesley writes. And again, this is on the opinion page. A little over 2 years ago, the federal government announced it would be, in quotes, exploring options, close quote, for the purchase of a new submarine fleet. Last week, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the winning bid for up to 12 diesel-electric submarines. He did so in advance of a visit to Ankara for the NATO Leaders Summit, where the deal between Canada and the German-Norwegian consortium TKMS was Exhibit A in demonstrating our commitment to increase defense spending. Canada has never built submarines before and has operated few in the modern history of our Navy. Buy Canadian was off the table this time. When we decided against nuclear-powered subs, we ruled out any manufacturer in the United States and were thrust into a global marketplace. The competition between German-Norwegian consortium TKMS and South Korea's defense giant Hanwha Ocean proved surprisingly tight, as both shipbuilders offered boats that met our requirements and promised massive direct economic benefits to Canada. The TKMS bid was favored for geostrategic reasons, as it emphasizes Canada's defense ties to key NATO allies in Europe and our commitment to Arctic and transatlantic security. The first new Canadian sub will be delivered by the mid-2030s, and it will be years after that before a full fleet is operational. So now that the bidding is over, it's time to return to some unanswered questions. A submarine fleet has been described as key to Canada's coastal defense, but this is narrow and misleading. Julie Kim, a defense expert writing for Canadian Global Affairs Institute, articulates a broader purpose. Now this is in quotes. Submarines enable Canada to detect and deter maritime threats, control its approaches, and project power and striking capability further from its shores. I'm sure she meant farther. Submarines are stealth assets, built to roam the high seas, including the Arctic Ocean. They won't be stay-at-home vessels, but will combine defense and offense, although the full offensive capabilities of the TKMS sub remain shrouded in secrecy. How effective these boats will be in patrolling the Canadian Arctic is another open question. The TKMS submarine has the tonnage required to break through Arctic ice, but just barely. What we can be sure of is that these submarines will never operate on their own. They will have to be networked into a complex web of sensors and intelligence gathering system that includes underwater sensors, shipboard platforms, helicopters, long-range patrol aircraft, and satellite monitoring. Assembling this network will present huge opportunities for Canadian innovation and Canadian export. Canada's new subs will need to be capable of operating alongside surface warships, including our Arctic offshore patrol vessels and as yet unbuilt fleet of river-class destroyers. Above all, our submarine fleet will need to be twinned with underwater drones, a capability the Royal Canadian Navy does not yet process in strength. Our networked balance of forces should also include icebreakers eventually. The Navy will have 6 patrol vessels, 15 destroyers, a small fleet of replacement coastal defense ships, also yet to be built, and undertaking number of underwater drones, but only 2 icebreakers. All this brings us back to the strategic purposes of submarines for Canada, which is the fundamental issue here. The federal government has a decade or so to work out what that is and explain it to the public in full. Submarines may run silent and run deep, but we need to bring the debate over their purpose for Canada to the surface. So again, that editorial, that opinion was written by Wesley Wark, W-A-R-K, who is a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance and Innovation. Okay, so that looks like that was the end of page 4. Okay, so we're almost done with the time allotted to us, and I just wanted to make known that this Niagara Falls review is dated, the date of I'm reading here, Tuesday, July 14, 2026. Proudly Canadian owned, and it's, I can't get a total page count on the computer. I'm going to go to page 2. Okay. The review belongs to a National News Media Council, a self-regulatory body governing Canadian newspapers. And they have a toll-free number, 1-844-877-1163. That's 1-844-877-1163. Okay, and that's how you would reach the National News Media Council. Or you may contact them online in an email, info@mediacouncil.ca. And again, that's info, I-N-F-O, info@mediacouncil, COUNCIL.ca. Okay? So I just wanted to remind you in closing that you've been listening to a reading of articles and feature from the July 14th, 2026 issue of the Niagara Falls Review. We read from the Niagara Falls Review every Saturday at 7 p.m. Your reader has been Fran McNamara, and I sincerely thank you so much for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service is Off Duty. At 9 o'clock, Sports Illustrated at 9 o'clock is The Athletic from the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For nearly 40 years, radio reading has served people who are blind or have a print disability throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service studios are located at 1199 Harlem Road. Please spread the word about your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For more information, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,